Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Creative Contact. Thank you so much for tuning in. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, and I've got an interesting episode for you guys today. We are going to talk about one beautiful moments. I wanted to just start the podcast with those more often because they make my life. I've been taking note of them, and I've got an interesting theory about beautiful moments. I'm going to talk to you about those here in a hot second. We're going to start with those two. Took a couple notes here. We're going to jump into a book that changed my life this last week, and then some thoughts about that book and how it has potentially changed how I'm thinking about my career trajectory. So we got a cool episode for you. It's also my last week in Georgetown, which is kind of insane that it's already been 2 months here. It's been a little bit of like a training camp. I'd show you, I'm trying to get lean, I'm trying to get leaned out. I've been cutting for the most part. I've been working out like a maniac. And anytime I kind of get in these like 2 month, I almost see them as like training camps. You know, if I was like a fighter, professional, that's how I view it, as like I don't have any distractions. I kind of go monk mode. I just work, I work out, I try to get in really good shape for no super apparent reason, but it's been going okay. I didn't make maybe quite as much progress as I would have liked, but better than nothing. So it's good discipline. I'm also super hungry and I'm excited to get back to eating. I'm gonna have a little break. I'm flying my Dukes out here for a vacation. I'll shoot you guys a pod next week too, I think, over the weekend. And then I'm gonna have 2 weeks with my Dukes. And then I'm gonna bounce to Thailand. So it's been a really rad adventure, and I'll probably talk about that next week more, about kind of a little Georgetown recap, my time in Penang and Malaysia, and thoughts on it, and thoughts about the adventure with mom and all that. So that'll be for next week. For now, I want to talk to you guys about beautiful moments, first and foremost. A couple beautiful moments for the kid. Tres historias para ustedes. So I got 3 little anecdotes. The first one is, I've been boxing in the park because I've been trying to get fit. I've been trying to get trim, lose some fat. So I've been doing a lot of shadow boxing. I haven't been able to find a trainer out here. So I was like, you know what, screw it. There's a really rad trainer. His name's Precision Striking on YouTube. And he has these rad videos. So I've been doing maybe boxing for maybe 45 minutes to an hour, 3 times a week. I was gonna say 3 to 4, but mostly 3 times out here in the park. And so I'll be out there, I'm topless, it's hot, and I just get my shadow boxing on, calisthenics, etc. There's this old dude. So it's a park. I also go on the walks in the afternoons, trying to get my 10,000 steps. And it's kind of a big circular park. There's like a basketball court, which I've talked about before on here on some pods. And there's like a little gazebo, which like people hang out at, like some old Asian moms and dads hang out over there with the families and stuff. Anyways, it's a cool park. There's some old shitty workout equipment. And in the mornings, I'll either hit my boxing workout or I'll go to the gym. But when I'm doing my boxing workout, there aren't a ton of people there. But there's always this one dude, and he has a limp. He always wears Crocs, old Asian dude, and he like limps. He's got like a one bad leg. So he'll like take a step. You've probably seen these folks. He takes a step against, almost like drag the other leg. But because I'd be out there every morning, and most mornings, he'd be out there. He's actually out there every morning. I'm taking his credit. I'd be out there 3 times a week. He's been out there. I can even lump myself into his workout program. He's out there every morning. But every time I'm out there, he's out there. I'll put it like that. And he started to, I don't know any Malay or Mandarin or whatever he speaks. He doesn't know any English. But every time he sees me, he started to like do this like shadow boxing thing. And there's something that I've also looked into research about this before, about like seeing a familiar face in the mornings. I heard this on Huberman. It's like there's something really powerful about it, that when I'm out there, I'll see him and he'll like pretend to shadow box, and I'll like come up to him and I'll like do some like head movements and like pretend to shadow box with him. And it's just like, it totally makes my day. It's like a great way to start the day whenever I'm out there. And I've started to like, I'll be like, ooh, ooh. And like if I see him, and I'll be like, what's up? And I'll like throw him a peace sign and he'll say, what's up back? And it's just cool. I feel like I'm kind of making friends in the park just from being out here, which is why I kind of like the whole slow mad thing, which I talk about. They just kind of develop on their own because you just end up seeing these people. So in the afternoons, almost every afternoon after I get my writing done and working for the channel and whatever, I try to get my 10,000 steps in. So I'll go for a walk maybe around 5 or 6 p.m. and just throw on a pod and just hit a bunch of loops. And he goes out there again for a second time. And so I'll see him and, we'll have a little shadow box or whatever. But he also has friends out there too. And so it's been cool to like, I'm starting to like make friends with like these old Asian guys that are out there. I've told you before about the kids. They're like this group of like Indian kids that are like a pack, and they're out there playing soccer and badminton, whatever. I'll play with them. But it's cool. I'm starting to like because they're all these old folks that hit the same lap that I do. I'm starting to like sink into like my retirement community here. I feel like it's like all these kind of old Asians and me, you know, walk in, and we all had to hit this loop. And so he's one guy that I'll see often, and it's so sweet. You know, he sees me, he'll pretend to shadow box, I'll come up to him, we'll, you know, throw a couple punches and keep it moving. And so that's one that's just, it always makes my day. And another one that is fascinating how small these moments can be and how much of an impact they can have, and this is something I want to talk about a little bit later, is if you have hung out with me at all, IRL, lately, you know I pee every 5 minutes. And it's kind of a problem, because then if I'm going out to the park or I want to do anything like in a public space, but for any length of time, I'm going to need to go pee somewhere. And so when I go out for these boxing workouts, it's like a mall, but it's completely run down for the most part. And so there's like 0 shops in there. It's like, it was probably Poppin' Mall at one point, but it's kind of sad now because it's all just like those closed kind of steel doors. There's maybe 1 or 2 shops that are open once in a blue, but when I'm there at like, 7:45, 8 in the morning, nobody's there. Except this one print shop, which is always open with the door half closed. I'm like, what are you guys doing in there? It's like they sell printers. It's not like a print shop, they sell printers. I'm like, what are you doing selling printers at 7:30? The mysteries of Asia. So it's like the Taj Mahal, the Buddhist temples, and this printer shop. And so I go in there anyways. And there's like it's hard to describe. And if you've ever been in the bathroom as a man, you know there are different styles of urinals. There's like, I'm not going to jump into this in case it gets too graphic, but there's one that I despise. It's the trough. You know what I'm talking about. There's no separation. It's just one big wet wall that pours down, and you just pee at the wall, and it often like splashes back at you. It's just terrible. And anyways, there's this trough that I found in this mall that I think is open 24/7, because every time I go in there, there's like nobody around. Except in the mornings when I'll go in there and there's a lady that cleans. And she gets there pretty early, probably normally when I'm getting there too. And there's like obviously the women's room and the men's room. And she'll often be in the women's room, so I won't see her all the time, but sometimes I'll be in there, or she'll be in there. And so when I go into the men's room, she'll be in there like, oh, and she'll like want to like, she'll like scurry out so that I can use the bathroom. I'm like, no problem. She doesn't speak English. But like, it's like seriously, it's fine, like no rush. But she's just super sweet. She'll always see me like, and she'll like run away. And so I go in there one of these times this last week, and I always, say thank you, even though she doesn't know. I'm like, I say like the universal like thank you sign. And I was just like, I go in there, she doesn't see me. She's out of the bathroom, and I go in, we don't see each other. But I come out of the bathroom, and there's like a closet, almost like a utility closet, and she's bent over, like, I don't even know what she's doing. It looks like she's like reaching in a bucket or preparing some sort of a, soapy detergent or something like that. I don't really know. But her butt's like sticking out of the closet. And when I'm out here, when I'm Asia, I can't even speak complete sentences. When I'm in Asia, I'm topless. I'm going to be honest with y'all. There's something about certain Latin American cities, like I can't get away with it, Medellin, because it feels weird. Certain places in Mexico, it also feels weird. And if you're by the beach, it's fine. But there are some places in Asia, and maybe it's just because I'm not as cognizant, because I can't communicate with people, that they just judge me silently, and that's fine, compared to actually making comments about it. Where I know in Thailand, white people have come be like, hey, wear your shirt because it's disrespectful. But like in Vietnam and in other places like in India, sometimes it was fine, sometimes it wasn't. But a lot of times when I'm Asia, I'm topless. A lot of guys out here are topless too, so I feel like it's not just me, okay? I'm not always that weird. And so I'm topless, so I have I don't have it here, but I have like a tank top that is just, I don't have it on, it's just like I have it in my hand. And so I walk by as she's like in this utility closet, and I'm like, you know how you can like twirl up a towel and like spank people with it? I don't spank her, okay, people. I'm not a savage, but I like flick her a little bit. I like walk by, I have this like, I have my like tank top kind of roll up, and I like flick her butt with it because she's bent over, and she like looks up and she sees me and she smiles, and we just both burst out laughing. And it was like, I know this could be taken the wrong way, it could be sexual harassment, blah, blah, blah. But like, we've seen each other 3 times a week for the last 2 months. It's like we do have this bit of rapport that I like was like this. It was almost second nature. Like we were just almost homies. Like I just like spanked her with this little like flick of the thing, and she burst out laughing. I burst out laughing. And it's just like, and now even every time I see her, there's just like this, it's crazy. Like the way that you can, my whole point of these beautiful moments is like how much you're able to make friends with people. And it's just on a human connection, even without language sometimes, that I find is fascinating. This could be a whole nother story too on like romantic things where sometimes, even if you can't speak a great language and you're kind of fumbling through it, there's like this universal, I think, language to attraction and sex that I think is really fascinating. That even if you're kind of fumbling through a language with somebody, as soon as you get into that dance of like, that becomes a sexual encounter, it almost becomes its own universal thing that can be understood without having the words. Obviously, consent, blah, 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 that's just important. That's what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, you know what I'm saying? There's there's just a connection that just, you can kind of read and feel with people that's really, really interesting. And so with this old guy, with this lady, with other old folks in the park that like, I can't speak a lick of whatever they're saying, but it's been cool kind of like just off of body language and cues and small interactions, I'm like starting to make friends, which is really rad. The last one, I'm gonna keep it brief because there's other shit I wanna talk about, is there's this, I've talked about this before, I think, but there's like this big building right near my apartment where I'm living. And the other day I had just this impulse. I was like, I should go over there and see what's up, because it looks like I live on the 16th floor and it looks like there's like, it's like vegetables or people coming out of there with market goods. And I haven't been able to find like a good like kind of wet market around me. And so I was like, I should just go over there. I was walking up the stairs. I was like, let me just go over there and see what's up. And so I went over there and there's this one stand. I've talked about this before in the pod, but there's this one stand. I was looking for a watermelon, and there's like specific watermelon booth where it's like a group of Indian dudes and they just have like a shitload of watermelon, and that's like their specialty is watermelon. And so I go over there. I've been loving watermelons, especially if I'm cutting weight. Key is weight loss gems. Weight loss with watermelon, y'all. It's great. It's filler, low calorie. It can mess you the stomach a little bit because of like there's a lot of I think it's fructose or something in there. But I love water. I eat a lot of watermelons whenever I'm cutting. So I've been eating a lot of watermelon. So I go over there. They see me coming. We've got our little thing down. They see me. I'm like, hey, what's up? I got my recyclable bag. They hook it up, I'll hook it up, it is what it is. But when the guys now have gotten to know me, they'll take, because I've told, one of the guys speaks English, I'll say, hey man, I want a watermelon, I'll go early because I'm a robot, so I always plan ahead. I'm like, I want one that's ready for tomorrow so that I never run out of watermelon. And so now when they see me, I come up and they take like special care in looking for a watermelon for tomorrow. The guy will like, he'll like spank it. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that, but like they'll like spank the watermelon. He'll be like, he'll hold it up. It's almost like you like listen to a seashell to see if you can like hear the ocean. He'll like hold up the watermelon, he'll like spank it, and he'll like rotate it, and he'll spank it, and he'll like feel it a little more and be like, not the one. And he'll like pick up another one, he'll like spank it, roll it around. It took him like 3 or 4, and then he was like, this is the one. And it was just like such a, it's just, again, it's beautiful. It's just like so nice to have somebody who cared so much about my watermelon ripeness that he would spank 3 watermelons before he gave me the perfect one. And I was like, this is rad. So of course I gave him a little tip. I was like, thank you. It's just, again, it's like these small things these small benefits that you get, again, another dude doesn't speak any English, that you get from living in a place after a while, that now they kind of, again, it's like, if you're in New York and you go to the same place, the same sandwich shop every morning, like you go in and the guy's gonna see you and like start chefing it up. And I've kind of gotten into that rhythm here where like they'll see me walking down the street and I'll like pop in and like start spanking watermelons for me. And so there's just something really nice about that. All 3 of those interactions, like I walked away and it just completely, it filled me with so much joy. And I think my whole point of that is once I have more, if I could get some sort of clout, some sort of online following going, I'd love to build this business called Beautiful Moments I've talked about before, where people send me their beautiful moments and I share them. But I'm still so small, I have such a small online following. I haven't been able to quite figure it out yet because I don't think I have enough like eyeballs on my stuff for people to want to send me their moments. But I think that could be really cool because to me, there's like a direct translation between noticing these small moments throughout the day and how much I enjoy my life. Because I'm a recluse. I spend a lot of time just writing in my crib, doing my thing, hit my routine, the gym, blah, blah, blah. But there's really something special that those are kind of how I can like mark the day, you know? And they happen often, and I think we overlook them. There's a zillion more that I could talk about that I've written down, I'll share for another time, but I really think that could be kind of my impact on the world is like, how do I get folks more in their life rather than like planning and thinking and like just sharing these really special moments? Because I'm a total cornball, and I think that might be like one of those callings, but I'm not sure how to finagle it without having more eyeballs yet. So something I'm trying to figure out. And so I've just been compiling my beautiful moments, but obviously, you know, it takes a while. So something that's kind of on the back burner of like a super cool kind of simple business I think could be rad. Anyways, this is already, I can't believe we're already at 20 minutes. What the fuck, man? I talk so much. So this pod might run a little long. I apologize. The next thing I want to talk to you about is this book that I read that recently changed my life. It's called When Breath Becomes Air. If you haven't heard of it, I hadn't heard of it. I got off of a reading list online. Long story short, there's a neuroscientist. He's not a neuroscientist, he's a neurosurgeon who also becomes a neuroscientist. And he's like top of the class of like everything he does. I think he goes to Stanford and then he goes to Yale He goes to Stanford, but he's really in philosophy too and literature. He goes to Stanford and then he goes to Cambridge to get a master's in philosophy. And then he goes to Yale Medical School and then he does some fancy residency, I think, in like San Francisco. But he's smart as fuck and he's just like always excelling. It's this fascination that he has with the meaning of life. And he loves literature and approaches philosophy, but he gets frustrated because it kind of lacks the I think applicable piece that I sometimes struggle with philosophy too. I'm like, I like to debate and like talk about philosophy and blah blah blah, but I miss the like here and now, the tangible, like the stuff you can like reach out and touch. And so he gets frustrated with that, so he switches from philosophy into science, neuroscience, because he wants to understand the human brain, and then eventually becomes a neurosurgeon because he wants to actually work on people's brains, like make a direct impact. And he comes to, I think it's like the last year of his residency. So he's now 36. He's been doing this, I think it's for, God knows how many years. He's like amazing. He's like this perfect neurosurgeon. He makes mistakes and he details those mistakes and stuff. It's interesting. But he gets a diagnosis that he has terminal cancer. He gets this lung cancer that gives him like a year to live. And it's crazy. The way that he then has this time, he's kind of unsure at first. He doesn't exactly know. But it's definitely it's like you're going to die. But he tries all these like different experiments to try to get better. But a guy, I've almost died before. I've talked about that many times. That completely motivates and I think is the lens through which I view life. But it's your boy. Elevator only goes so far to the top. I'm like, this is crazy. This is philosophy. It's different from someone who's like a fucking neuroscientist, neurosurgeon to talk about these same philosophies and approaches on life. And it was so interesting. It's also just a fascination of mine, I think, because it's always kind of in the back of my mind with my blood disorder that it was so cool to be able to see the way that he rationalizes and thinks about science and philosophy and having been on the other side of this spectrum for so long, like working on people's brains, giving terminal diagnosis to people, actually knowing what's going on in the brain, and then going, like we always have that thought exercise, like what would happen if you died in a year, if you had a year to live, what would you change? And it was so fascinating just to see the way he processed that, as well as like halfway through this, and he's like going through chemo, he has all these terrible things going on, he's still in the operating room, like working on people. And he just has crazy stories about what it's like being like 36 hours in the OR and cutting people's brains open, and the stakes are so high and the precision is like a millimeter off, and you're gonna like cut open this like sac that paralyzes people from like the waist down, and like this other person, like he like stimulates this wrong part of the brain and like they become like overwhelmingly sad. It's just like, it's such a game of perfection and minutia and stamina that it made me think about my life differently. Not only with like understanding life and death and how it's never so far away as we think it is, and then also how little of his life changed. I mean, obviously changed drastically, but then he's like, okay, I'm going to work on this book. So he starts writing and works on this book. He ends up having a daughter, which is another thing I want to talk about too, but just how much meaning he had in having that daughter, even though he knew that he wasn't going to be around a long time, he and his wife. And it made me think about my own career, both with these videos, with the writing, that I wonder if, because this is a question I want to pose to you, is what is the importance of impact in your career? I frame that to you personally. I'm also framing that as kind of like an interesting idea that I've been toying with. What is the importance of an impact, and how much of impact do we need to have? How much do we feel is almost obligatory? Or is it obligatory? Because for myself, I've been of the mind lately, especially after the near-death experience a little over a year ago, that this life is so short that what I'm doing is almost irrelevant in a way, like on the grand scheme of things. And I like that approach because it frees me up a lot, I think. It makes me feel like nothing that I do really has significance, which makes me feel better about the day-to-day of just doing things that I enjoy, because it's like, okay, if I'm good and I'm good to the people around me, I'm having this little impact of just being a nice guy and creating my videos and whatever, it's cool, and I can become dust, and I will here soon, and nothing really matters. At the same time, I wonder if I'm letting myself off the hook of doing something that should have more of an impact. Because reading his book, like even if my YouTube channel takes off and I get a zillion followers, you can only do so much with a video. And with my short stories, which I love writing, and they're comedic for the most part. But say even my book, I think this is going to sound so strange, I'm such a cornball, but like my book would be kind of like my pivotal book that I'm kind of been working on would be something like Eat, Pray, Love, which is, I'm working on one called Eat, Pray, Thug, but it's kind of that same thing. It's like spiritual, it's also perspective, it's also stories, it's also funny, right? These books can have impact. Thinking about film as well, doing documentaries, or working, maybe being a screenwriter someday. Like, we learn through story, right? Stories can have impact. But it's different, right? It's different than being a therapist. It's different than being a neurosurgeon. It's different than being hands-on with a counselor. Something where you're hands-on, it's one-to-one. You directly change this person's life, like right there. And so I've just been really thinking about that more. Like my whole work history in the past was working with nonprofits, having that direct impact. But that didn't also feel right either, because I felt like I was doing myself a disservice, because I felt like I wasn't able to pursue my passion. And I got burned out on it after a while, because it's just hard work. And so I'm torn between this sort of like my happiness versus impact versus other people's happiness sort of equation, where, right, they're talking about like ikigai, like what's that one thing you can do nobody else can do that's good for the world. And I just wonder if like maybe my calling is to just do something like much more selfless, that even I think I can tell myself the story I'm telling myself around my YouTube channel, around my writing, around this podcast, even talking about my life here, is that these can be potent because they're stories and people, it's like good poetry, right? It's very personal, but it can really be powerful because people can read that and feel seen. But it's still inherently self-centered. And as someone who's been labeled selfish before, and understandably so, I think in a lot of ways, maybe that's my own kind of imposter syndrome around being selfish, selfless, and also, sacrifice. I'm not, I'm single. I don't have kids. There's a lot of things in my life that I can see that almost feel like they aren't, like I'm not sacrificing or I'm not compromising, which makes it hard for me to kind of work through this internal narrative that I'm not selfish. And so I wonder with art, and I guess that's kind of I've been looking into this thing. It's called effective altruism, something like something altruism, EA. Something altruism, which is like you can do things, but it still has an impact. But I'd be curious your take on how altruistic is art if it comes from a deeply personal place. Say I write a personal poem and you love it and it's cool, but like it still is about me, for example. Same with the YouTube channel. These are like lessons I'm learning, but it's still me telling the stories of how I learned these things. Same with this podcast. These are beautiful moments that happened to me. And so this is just something I've been kind of wrestling with, is like maybe if life is short, maybe I should just suck it up and do something that's like, I don't know, just dedicate my life to something that has a bigger impact to other people, even if I'm less happy for it. Because this year has been really interesting seeing, like, I've had all this time to work on my personal projects and I love it and I get excited about them, but it's still empty in a way. I still am not, and maybe it's because I don't have any following, or I can't ever see, nobody's like, Kia, I loved the short story, you know what I mean? Because I haven't released anything yet. And so maybe that's a piece too, is I wonder the difference between impact and art at the same time, or even work and impact. Is like, does it need to have a greater impact for it to be worthwhile doing? Or could you work on a fiction, could you be a fiction novelist and work on a book for 3 years and you die before it comes out and it was like still worth it? Or does it need to be Star Wars for it to be worth it? If you're just happy and fulfilled and enjoy doing it, is that enough? I don't know. These are the things I've been thinking about. And that's where this book really, I think, affected me in a lot of ways. Is thinking about like how he actually really changed people's lives. Like there's no way I'm ever going to be a neurosurgeon, but like there are definitely other things that I could do that I think could be maybe more helpful than working on my art. Or maybe not, And so that's a question I'm interested to hear your take on. If you're down to talk to me about it, drop some things in the comments below. I was working on a last thing, I promise, and we'll wrap it up. This last week, I was working on a book. I wanted to start working on like a nonfiction book, not the one Eat, Pray, Thug shit, like short stories and fun stuff like that, but like a nonfiction book. I was like, this could be really cool, like, because I like to research, I like to have interviews, I want to learn and talk about things. So I started working on this book. I was going to call it Ordinary and have a cool subtitle like why being extraordinary is overrated or something like that. But it's sort of this like the cost of greatness and ambition, which I'm fascinated with, just in myself, trying to work through this sense of ambition and striving always, and also being present. This sort of the thesis, I guess, being versus becoming. And I got really excited about it, and I started working on it, researching it, started working on the outline, and I found somebody that already beat me to it. I was bummed. I had like this very specific vision around like ambition and how we're almost like not allowed to be normal anymore, and sort of like in this culture of like Instagram memes and Michael Jordan documentaries, like it's like you have to be great. And it's almost like if you aren't great, like if you aren't somebody, you're nobody, And I think just having this ambition, this sole focus to be successful in music that cannibalized the last decade and change of my life, it's something that I'm like obsessed with. I'm like thinking about is like how ambition, I think, can be so toxic, but that it doesn't have to be. Like I think a lot of folks, I think you can't have your cake and eat it too, is what I'm saying, but I don't think being great is the way to do it. And greatness, I know, is like, it sounds weird, like I'm against greatness. I'm not, like, go for your dreams, but that I think we often neglect personal things, myself included. Like, this is coming from a guy who got a vasectomy because I was like solely focused on becoming a musician. It's like how often we let our personal lives crumble and sacrifice for our professional ones, and that the story behind those. Like, I just wanted to study Kanye, Michael Jordan, Kobe, probably, might be Robin Williams, everyone from the 27 Club, like how there's so many signs that greatness doesn't bring happiness, and yet we still pursue these things like blindly, and that it's just an interesting thing of like the things that we think that we take for granted so often are the actual things that make us happy. And it's just, I like that kind of like, it's just an interesting sort of equation. And I think as humans, we are built to have purpose and to want to strive towards things. But there's just this like obsession with greatness right now that I think I wanna be kind of, I like the idea of being countercultural and like just like what the beauty is of just being normal. And again, kind of comes back to like my beautiful moments thing, like happiness that I just think, fortunately this other girl beat me to the book and she's younger than me. What the fuck? Man, speaking of ambition, I need to get my shit together. All right, y'all, I've taken enough of your time. Thank you so much. Let me know what you think about these ideas, things I've been thinking about, things I've been working through. I've been writing a lot, kind of thinking about kids and next steps and partners, and that's starting to make sense to me. I think what I've stumbled on is that like I'm an unconventional dude, right? You don't live abroad for 5 years because you're trying to do a conventional path, and so I'm like, why would my life path with wife and kids be conventional too? Like, so I'm just gonna say I'm not worried about that too much for now. We're gonna make that happen someday. I think that would be cool. Definitely the partner, still figuring out the kids, but that I'm not spending too much. I think that was personal pressure I was putting on myself because I was trying to like fit into like the typical life path and the white picket fence and the dog and the blah blah blah. And I was like, Kia's always been atypical, always been a late bloomer. Gonna probably be a late bloomer at this too. Chill the fuck out. Figure out what you're doing. The rest will come in time. Let's get it. Thanks so much for tuning in as always, y'all, and I'll check you on the next one. Peace.